Picture this nightmare scenario unfolding in the forests of Ohio. You're an American soldier in November 1791, part of an army of about 1,000 men camped in a clearing surrounded by dark, endless woods. It's just before dawn. You're exhausted from weeks of slow marching. Your musket is faulty. Your powder is damp, and you haven't had a proper meal in days. You've been hearing strange sounds from the forest for hours, sounds your officers tell you to ignore. Then, as the first gray light breaks, you hear scattered gunfire from the militia camp outside your position. Within seconds, it explodes into a roar. Screaming. War cries you've never heard before. The militia, the men you were counting on to warn you, are being slaughtered. Before you can fully understand what's happening, warriors emerge from the tree line on all sides. You're surrounded. Completely surrounded. Your officers shout orders to form lines. But the forest is so close, you can see individual faces in the shadows. For the next 3 hours, you'll fight in the open while your enemy fires from behind trees you can't penetrate. Your ammunition will run out. Your comrades will fall all around you. And when your general finally orders a desperate bayonet charge to break out, you'll have to literally abandon the wounded, the camp followers, the women and children, and sprint for your life through 30 miles of hostile forest. This is the Battle of the Wabash, November 4th, 1791. The worst defeat the United States Army would ever suffer against Native Americans, a 97% casualty rate that makes it proportionally more devastating than Little Bighorn, more catastrophic than any single day of the Civil War. A disaster so complete it would force the young republic to completely rebuild its military from scratch. Before we dive into how an entire American army was annihilated in 3 hours, smash that like button and subscribe to Maproom Battles for the battles history tried to forget. Comment below, what was the worst military disaster in American history? Let's explore this together. To understand how this catastrophe happened, we need to rewind 8 years to 1783. After 8 grueling years of fighting, the American Revolution finally came to a close with the Treaty of Paris. Great Britain formally recognized United States sovereignty over all the land east of the Mississippi River and south of the Great Lakes, an enormous territory. On paper, this was a magnificent victory. In reality, it was a promise the United States couldn't keep. Because the native tribes, living in what was called the Old Northwest, the region that would become Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, and Wisconsin, were not parties to this treaty. They had not been consulted. They had not surrendered. And many of them, especially brilliant leaders like Little Turtle of the Miami and Blue Jacket of the Shawnee, absolutely refused to recognize American claims to the land northwest of the Ohio River. From the native perspective, this was their ancestral homeland. The British didn't own it to give away. The Americans certainly hadn't conquered it. The treaty was a piece of paper written by white men in Paris, deciding the fate of people who weren't in the room. Meanwhile, the young United States government faced a brutal financial crisis. The country was drowning in Revolutionary War debt, millions of dollars owed to France, to individual soldiers, to merchants. And under the Articles of Confederation, the federal government lacked the authority to collect taxes from the states. They were bankrupt and powerless. So they developed a plan that seemed elegant in its simplicity, raise funds through the methodical, organized sale of land in the Northwest Territory. They would survey it, divide it into neat rectangular townships, and sell it to settlers and land speculators for hard currency. This plan had one enormous problem. The land they planned to sell was already occupied both by Native American villages that had been there for generations and by American squatters who had moved in illegally hoping to claim land for free. Both groups would need to be removed by force. In 1790, President George Washington, the hero of the Revolution, now struggling with the messy reality of actually governing, authorized a military campaign to secure the region and make it safe for American settlement. This was America's first offensive military operation as an independent nation. A force of 1,453 men was assembled under Brigadier General Josiah Harmar, a Revolutionary War veteran who had distinguished himself in previous campaigns. On October 7th, 1790, Harmar's expedition marched confidently northward from Fort Washington, modern-day Cincinnati, Ohio, into the forests. The campaign would end in absolute disaster. Harmar made the fatal mistake of dividing his forces, splitting his army into smaller detachments that couldn't support each other. The Native Confederacy, led by Little Turtle, had been watching and waiting. They ambushed Harmar's divided forces, one after another, picking them apart. By the time Harmar retreated back to Fort Washington, he had suffered more than 200 casualties, killed, wounded, or missing. The first attempt to claim the Northwest Territory was not just unsuccessful, it was humiliating. Washington was furious. The defeat undermined American credibility, encouraged Native resistance, and made the government look weak and incompetent. So he ordered Arthur Saint, Clair, the governor of the Northwest Territory, to mount a more vigorous, more professional effort by the summer of 1791. Saint. Clair seemed like the right man on paper. He was a Scottish-born Revolutionary War general who had served with distinction. He had experience, military discipline, and a well-earned reputation for careful administration and logistics. But by 1791, Clair was also aging in his mid-50s, which was considered old for active field command. He was chronically ill, suffering from gout so severe he sometimes couldn't walk or ride a horse. And he was weighed down by the nearly impossible political chaos of building an army essentially from scratch in a bankrupt nation. By late spring 1791, Clair had managed to raise approximately 2,000 troops through a combination of federal recruitment and state militia levies. But the quality was abysmal. Many soldiers were inexperienced. Some had never fired a musket before joining. Supplies were desperately short. Weapons were faulty muskets that misfired, powder that was old and weak. Desertions were disturbingly common. Men would slip away at night, disappearing back to settlements. Clair repeatedly, desperately begged the War Department for proper equipment, healthy horses, and adequately trained soldiers. But bureaucratic delays slowed everything to an agonizing crawl. The federal government, under the Articles of Confederation, was structurally incapable of rapid response. Requisitions had to go through multiple layers. States had to approve expenditures. Contractors delayed deliveries. Everything that could go wrong did. Meanwhile, the Native Confederacy understood perfectly what was coming. This wasn't a surprise. Under Little Turtle's shrewd, calculating leadership, they strategized carefully for the next inevitable American invasion. If the Americans wanted to seize native land, the Confederacy was absolutely determined to defend it with every warrior they could muster from the Miami, Shawnee, Delaware, and other allied tribes. By early fall 1791, St. Clair finally put his troubled army into motion. They marched northward from Fort Washington, leaving civilization behind and entering the endless, dark forests of the Northwest Territory. Progress was agonizingly slow, maybe 5 or 6 miles per day. They were literally carving a road through dense forest as they went, cutting trees, clearing underbrush, building a supply route behind them. Horses died from overwork and poor feed. Supplies spoiled in the autumn rain. Morale sagged day by day, and among the American soldiers, one feeling became overwhelming and constant: the sensation of being watched. Eyes in the forest, shadows moving just beyond sight. As the army trudged deeper into hostile territory, St. Clair received constant, increasingly urgent warnings from his scouts. The natives were gathering in force, large numbers, more than expected. The general felt absolutely cornered between impossible pressures. The political pressure to succeed was immense. Washington himself was watching. The personal pressure, his reputation, his honor, his legacy. The national pressure America needed this victory to establish credibility. Winter was rapidly approaching, and retreat at this point would be seen as complete failure. Another humiliation after Harmar's defeat. So despite the warnings, despite his own illness, despite the clear signs that his army was falling apart, St. Clair pressed stubbornly on. His plan was to establish a fortified post deep in native territory before the snow fell, then use it as a base for future operations. By early November, St. Clair's battered army reached a clearing near what is now Fort Recovery, Ohio. The total number of effectives had been reduced to around 1,000 men, half the force he'd started with. Hundreds had deserted. Others were too sick to fight. Unbeknownst to the Americans, settling into their camp, Little Turtle, Blue Jacket, and over 1,000 native warriors from the Confederation were already closing in silently through the forest. Under the cover of darkness and the dense woods, the native forces formed a circle around the American encampment. Their tactical plan was sophisticated and methodical. First, attack the small contingent of militia that was camped outside the main defensive perimeter. Overrun them quickly to create panic. Then, using that chaos as cover, attack the main camp simultaneously from all sides, a complete encirclement that would trap the Americans in the open with nowhere to run. The warriors moved into position through the night, absolutely silent. The Americans had no idea they were completely surrounded. At first light on November 4th, 1791, scattered gunfire erupted at the perimeter. It began. Native warriors advanced quickly and quietly from multiple directions, concentrating their devastating opening assault on the militia camped outside the main American position. These militia, less trained, less disciplined than the regular soldiers, were the weak point. And Little Turtle knew it. The attack was overwhelming and brutal. Warriors emerged from the tree line firing muskets and arrows, then closed with tomahawks and war clubs. The militia, caught completely by surprise, while many were still asleep or eating breakfast, tried desperately to form some kind of defensive line. They failed. Within minutes, the militia position was completely overrun. Men were killed where they stood. Others broke and ran toward the main camp, screaming warnings. The panic was contagious and immediate. Inside the main encampment, American regular soldiers scrambled to respond. Officers shouted orders. Drums beat the alarm. Men grabbed their weapons and rushed to form battle lines at the edge of the clearing. As the warriors emerged from the tree line advancing toward them, the American regulars immediately formed up and fired a disciplined volley into the attacking force. The volley worked temporarily. The concentrated musket fire forced the native warriors to hold their position at the tree line rather than charging straight into the camp. But this was not a victory. It was merely a pause, because what the Americans didn't yet realize was the true scale of what they faced. Native marksmen, warriors, armed with muskets and rifles, many of them better shots than the American soldiers, moved swiftly between trees and natural cover. They used the forest itself as a fortress. They fired from behind thick tree trunks that musket balls couldn't penetrate. They moved, fired, moved again. And they were systematically developing a circular attack pattern around St. Clair's position, tightening the noose. Within 30 minutes of the initial contact, the native warriors had completely encircled the American camp. The trap was closed. The Americans were surrounded on all sides, caught in the open clearing while their enemies fought from cover in the forest that pressed in from every direction. The American regulars fought bravely, history would record that. But they were fighting under impossible conditions. Their firearms were in poor condition after weeks of rain and rough handling. Many muskets misfired. Powder was damp, and they were positioned out in the open, fully exposed, while the native warriors were able to take effective cover within the surrounding forest. It was like shooting at shadows while standing in a spotlight. The casualties mounted with horrifying speed. Officers fell, first deliberately targeted by native sharpshooters who understood that killing leaders creates chaos. Soldiers loading their muskets were shot mid-action. The wounded screamed. The smoke from hundreds of muskets created a choking fog that made it even harder to see threats. Artillery pieces fired canisters shot into the trees, but with limited effect against dispersed, mobile targets. As the ammunition situation became increasingly desperate, Major General Richard Butler ordered his battalion to fix bayonets and charge the central native position. If they couldn't shoot the enemy, they'd stab them. The bayonet charge was a desperate, brutal affair. Soldiers screamed as they ran toward the tree line, trying to create enough fear and momentum to break the encirclement. Some warriors fell back. Others stood their ground. Hand-to-hand fighting erupted in the shadows of the forest, bayonets against tomahawks, musket butts against war clubs. For a brief moment, it seemed like the charge might work, but then the warriors simply melted back, deeper into the forest, reformed, and resumed firing from new positions. The Americans had gained nothing except more casualties. After 3 hours of continuous, grinding combat, Arthur St. Clair sick, exhausted, watching his army disintegrate, called together his remaining officers for a desperate council. They faced total annihilation. The encirclement was complete. Ammunition was running critically low. The casualty rate was catastrophic. Officers were being systematically killed. If they stayed in the camp, everyone would die. Saint? Clair made the hardest decision of his life. They would attempt a breakout, a desperate bayonet charge through the weakest point in the encirclement, trying to punch through to safety. But this meant something unconscionable willfully, deliberately abandoning their supply wagons, the camp followers, the women and children who had traveled with the army, and worst of all, the wounded who couldn't run. They would be left behind to whatever fate awaited them. The order was given. Fix bayonets. Prepare to charge. When I give the signal, run and don't stop running until you reach Fort Jefferson, 30 miles south. The men formed up for what might be their last action. Then Saint. Clair gave the command. Charge. The surviving soldiers, maybe 500 men still capable of fighting and running, launched themselves toward the southern section of the native line. They screamed, fired their last shots, and came on with cold steel. The warriors, seeing the desperate breakout attempt, scattered tactically into the forest rather than standing to receive the bayonet charge. They understood let the faster soldiers escape. There was no point dying to stop men who were already beaten. The survivors seized this brief opportunity. They ran. Not in formation, not as an organized military unit, as individuals fleeing for their lives through hostile forest. Behind them, they could hear the screams of the wounded they'd abandoned. They didn't look back. They couldn't. Behind them, the native warriors who had just won the most complete victory in the Indian Wars didn't pursue the fastest runners. Instead, they focused methodically on picking off the stragglers, the wounded, trying to keep up. The slower soldiers, the exhausted. Anyone who fell behind was killed or captured. The forest became a 30-mile gauntlet of terror. The surviving American soldiers reached Fort Jefferson later that evening, having covered almost 30 miles in a single desperate day, an incredible distance for exhausted, traumatized men. But Fort Jefferson offered little relief. It was a small, crude fortification with limited shelter and almost no provisions available. The commander there, seeing the flood of bleeding, terrified survivors, faced his own impossible choice. There wasn't enough food or space for everyone, so he ordered all men who were still physically able to continue fleeing south to Fort Hamilton, another 45 miles farther away. Those who could not travel, the badly wounded, the completely exhausted, were left behind in an overcrowded, filthy camp with almost nothing to eat. They would have to wait for relief that might never come. The able-bodied staggered on through the night, covering another 45 miles. In total, some of the survivors traveled 75 miles in just over 24 hours, an almost superhuman feat of endurance, driven by pure terror. On November 11th, a week after the battle, Saint Clair dispatched a relief convoy from Fort Washington. Led by Major David Ziegler and escorted by 100 soldiers, the party cautiously approached Fort Jefferson. Unsure what they would find, they discovered 116 survivors still there, all of them starving, many wounded, some dying from infected injuries. the supplies were distributed. The wounded were loaded onto wagons. The slow, painful return to civilization began. In January 1792, 2 months after the disaster, Lieutenant Colonel James Wilkinson took command of what remained of the reformed 2nd Regiment. He led his troops back north to the now abandoned battlefield with a grim mission to bury the dead and recover the lost artillery pieces. But when they arrived, the scale of devastation made the effort nearly impossible. The battlefield was a frozen horror. Bodies lay where they had fallen, now covered in snow, scavenged by animals. The supply wagons had been burned. Equipment was scattered, and the artillery pieces, the cannons that were supposed to protect the army, sat silent and useless among the corpses. Wilkinson's men buried what they could and recovered some equipment. But the sight of that frozen killing ground would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The casualty statistics, when finally compiled, were staggering and unprecedented in American military history. Of the 52 officers engaged in the battle, 39 were killed and 7 wounded. Think about that. 88% officer casualties. The leadership was systematically destroyed. Out of an estimated 920 American troops actually present and engaged in the fighting, 632 were killed and 264 were wounded. That left just 24 men, 24 out of 920, who came out physically unscathed. A 97% casualty rate. To put this in perspective, this was proportionally worse than Custer's last stand at Little Bighorn, which had about 100% casualties, but involved far fewer men. It was worse than any single day of the Civil War. It remains, to this day, the worst defeat the United States Army ever suffered against Native American forces. Meanwhile, the Native Confederacy suffered fewer than 100 casualties total, maybe 50 to 75 warriors killed or wounded. The victory was as complete as any in military history. As news of the catastrophic defeat spread south and east, outrage erupted across the young United States. How could this happen? How could an entire American army led by a Revolutionary War general, supported by artillery, fighting under the American flag, be annihilated by savages in the wilderness? The racist assumptions of the era couldn't comprehend that native warriors had simply fought a tactically superior battle. The government faced intense public demands to explain how such a calamity had occurred. Who was responsible? Who would be held accountable in response? Congress launched the first formal congressional investigation in American history. Committees were formed. Witnesses were called. Documents were subpoenaed. St. Clair was brought before Congress to testify and defend his decisions. The investigation was thorough and politically charged. St. Clair's defenders pointed to the systemic failures: inadequate supplies, faulty weapons, inexperienced troops, bureaucratic delays, insufficient support from the War Department. St. Clair himself had repeatedly warned his superiors that the army wasn't ready. The government had sent him anyway. His critics focused on his tactical decisions. Why didn't he have better scouts? Why was the camp so poorly defended? Why was the militia positioned outside the main force? Why didn't he withdraw when warned? After months of testimony and deliberation, St. Clair was eventually cleared of criminal wrongdoing or gross negligence. The investigation concluded that the disaster resulted from systemic failures across the entire military and governmental structure, not one man's incompetence. But public confidence in the nation's military leadership had collapsed completely. Saint Clair, his reputation destroyed despite the official exoneration, resigned from military command. He would continue as territorial governor for a few more years, but his military career was finished. Yet the defeat, catastrophic as it was, also forced the federal government to confront a deeper, more fundamental problem that had been festering since independence. The United States had no reliable standing army capable of defending its territory or projecting power. The military that fought the Wabash battle was a hastily assembled collection of short-term recruits, unreliable militia, and whatever the government could scrape together. It wasn't a professional force. It was barely a force at all. In response to this reality, Congress finally authorized something revolutionary, a new, professional military force called the Legion of the United States. It would be commanded by Major General Mad Anthony Wayne, a Revolutionary War hero known for aggressive tactics and iron discipline. Wayne would spend the next 2 years carefully, methodically building a real army. He drilled his soldiers relentlessly. He improved weapons and equipment. He studied native tactics and developed counters. He built forts and supply lines. He prepared for war properly. In 1794, Wayne's Legion would win the Battle of Fallen Timbers, decisively defeating the same native confederacy that had destroyed St. Clair. That victory would lead to the Treaty of Greenville in 1795, which opened the Northwest Territory to American settlement. In this way, a complete disaster became the catalyst for major military reform and the eventual expansion of the young republic. Let's talk about the modern parallels, because the Battle of the Wabash teaches lessons that echo through every war since. Think about the intelligence failure. St. Clair knew natives were gathering but didn't know numbers or positions. Modern, every intelligence failure from Pearl Harbor to 9/11. What you don't know kills you. Think about the bureaucratic delays. St. Clair begged for supplies, weapons, trained soldiers denied by red tape. Modern, every military stymied by bureaucracy. Requisition delays cost lives. Think about the desertion problem. Hundreds disappeared before battle. Modern, every army with morale problems. Vietnam fragging. Iraq, Afghanistan soldiers refusing deployment. Think about the militia versus regular divide. Militia broke immediately. Regulars fought longer. Modern, every debate about professional versus citizen armies. Quality matters. Think about the encirclement tactics. Native warriors surrounded camp systematically. Modern Cannae, Stalingrad, every encirclement. Being surrounded is catastrophic. Think about the terrain advantage. Natives fought from forest cover. Americans in open. Modern, every asymmetric conflict. Vietnam, Afghanistan. Defender uses terrain. Think about the faulty equipment. Muskets misfired. Powder was damp. Modern, every military equipment failure. M16s jamming Vietnam. Maintenance matters. Think about the officer targeting. Native sharpshooters killed leaders first. Modern decapitation strikes. Killing commanders disrupts. Think about the ammunition shortage. Americans ran out after 3 hours. Modern logistics wins wars. Ammunition expenditure rates critical. Think about the abandoned wounded. Saint Clair left them to die to save others. Modern battlefield ethics. Triage decisions. Medics stay versus retreat. Think about the 30-mile flight. Survivors ran all day and night. Modern every desperate retreat. Dunkirk, Chocin Reservoir. Retreats test endurance. Think about the casualty rate. 97% killed or wounded. Modern worst U.S. defeat by percentage. Even Little Bighorn was smaller scale. Think about the congressional investigation. First in U.S. history. Modern, every war spawns inquiries. Gulf of Tonkin. Iraq WMDs. Afghanistan withdrawal. Think about the standing army creation. Disaster forced professional military. Modern, every military reform after defeat. How defeats drive change. Think about the political pressure to succeed. Washington demanded victory. Saint Clair complied despite readiness. Modern, every politically driven military decision. Vietnam escalation. Iraq surge. Think about the supply line vulnerability. Army couldn't sustain deep penetration. Modern logistics determines operational reach. Desert storm supply lines. Think about the scout effectiveness. Saint Clair had scouts, but discounted warnings. Modern intelligence collection versus analysis. Seeing versus believing. Think about the night movement. Natives positioned in darkness. Modern night operations. Night vision technology changed this. Think about the dawn attack. Strike at first light when enemy sleepy. Modern every dawn assault. Tactical surprise timing. Think about the panic contagion. Militia broke. Spread fear to regulars. Modern morale collapse is contagious. How units dissolve. Think about the bayonet charge desperation. When ammo out, fix steel. Modern close combat, last resort. Fallujah, house to house. Think about the tactical withdrawal versus rout. Organized breakout became individual flight. Modern every retreat risks becoming rout. Discipline under fire. Think about the fort overcrowding. Jefferson couldn't handle refugees. Modern every humanitarian crisis. Refugee camps overwhelmed. Think about the delayed relief. Week before convoy arrived. Modern casualty evacuation timelines. Golden hour trauma care versus days. Think about the burial detail. Wilkinson returning to bury frozen dead. Modern graves registration. Recovering remains matters to families. Think about the blame assignment. Who responsible? Modern, every military disaster has scapegoats. Accountability versus systemic failure. Think about the officer casualty rate. 88% killed or wounded. Modern leadership exposure. Leaders forward versus safe. Think about the native tactics sophistication. Encirclement, covering fire, pursuit selectivity. Modern indigenous warfare, often sophisticated. Underestimating enemies. Think about the forest warfare. Close terrain negated American advantages. Modern every jungle, urban fight. Vietnam, Mogadishu. Complex terrain equalizes. Think about the psychological warfare. Sounds in forest before battle. Modern fear as weapon. Demoralization matters. Think about the women and children present. Camp followers abandoned. Modern military families near combat. Dependence in war zones. Think about the weapons quality gap. Some natives had better firearms. Modern technology doesn't always favor wealthy. AK-47, reliability versus M16 complexity. Think about the surprise complete. Americans had no idea surrounded until attack. Modern strategic, tactical surprise. How to achieve it. Think about the casualty care absence. Wounded left behind. No treatment. Modern battlefield medicine revolution. Combat medics. Medvac. Think about the political embarrassment. Young Republic humiliated internationally. Modern military defeats as political crises. Somalia, Black Hawk Down effect. Think about the racism blindness. Americans couldn't believe savages won. Modern cultural prejudice in warfare. Every underestimated enemy. Think about the treaty violations. British gave land they didn't control. Modern every peace treaty that ignores people. Sykes-Picot, Versailles. Think about the debt-driven policy. Land sales to pay war debts. Modern economic motivations for war. Oil, resources, markets. Think about the squatter problem. Illegal settlers' complicated situation. Modern, every settlement dispute. West Bank, disputed territories. Think about the Confederation weakness. Articles of Confederation couldn't tax or act quickly. Modern weak central governments. EU struggles. Une limitations. Think about the revolutionary debt. War debts drove policy. Modern, every post-war economic crisis. How war costs shape policy. Think about the divided loyalties. Militia versus regulars. Different commitment levels. Modern coalition warfare. Different motivations among allies. Think about the little turtle genius. Brilliant strategist. Tactician. Modern, every great indigenous leader. Sitting Bull. Crazy Horse. Geronimo. Think about the Blue Jacket coordination. Multi-tribal confederacy. Modern alliance building. Unified resistance stronger. Think about the Washington pressure. President demanded results. Modern civilian-military tension. Every commander under political pressure. Think about the Harmar precedent. Previous failure shaped expectations. Modern learning from defeats. After-action reviews. Think about the fort chain. Jefferson, Hamilton, Washington. Modern forward operating bases. FOBs in Afghanistan, Iraq. Think about the road building, carving supply route as they advanced. Modern infrastructure in warfare. Seabees, combat engineers. Think about the horse casualties. Transportation infrastructure failing. Modern every military depends on logistics vehicles. Trucks, helicopters. Think about the autumn campaign timing. Racing against winter. Modern seasonal warfare. Weather windows matter. Think about the scout warnings ignored. Leaders discounted intelligence. Modern intelligence failure isn't always collection, often analysis. Think about the officer experience. Saint. Clair had Revolutionary War record. Modern past success doesn't guarantee future. Different wars require different skills. Think about the gout disability. Commander physically impaired. Modern fitness standards for combat commanders. Physical ability matters. Think about the supply spoilage. Food rotting. Equipment failing. Modern environmental effects on materiel. Every climate challenge. Think about the sensation of being watched. Soldiers felt observed. Modern surveillance anxiety. Drone overhead. Satellites. Thermal. Think about the camp outside camp. Militia separate from regulars. Modern perimeter security. How far out do you position? Think about the first light attack. Dawn timing deliberate. Modern circadian rhythm warfare. When humans most vulnerable. Think about the 3-hour battle. Relatively quick destruction. Modern high-intensity combat exhausts quickly. Sustained fire rates. Think about the smoke obscuration. Gunpowder smoke blinded both sides. Modern battlefield obscurance. Smoke grenades. Dust. Think about the canister shot. Anti-personnel artillery. Modern every-area weapon. Cluster bombs. Flechettes. Think about the hand-to-hand combat. Bayonets versus tomahawks. Modern close-quarters battle. Knives. Entrenching tools. Think about the breakout direction. South, toward safety. Modern egress routes. Every operation needs escape plan. Think about the scattered pursuit. Let fast escape. Kill slow. Modern pursuit tactics. Cutting off retreat versus letting run. Think about the 75-mile flight total. Superhuman endurance from terror. Modern adrenaline and survival. What humans can do when desperate. Think about the starvation at fort. Relief infrastructure inadequate. Modern humanitarian logistics. Refugee support overwhelming. Think about the 2-month delay. Burial detail winter. Modern battlefield recovery. MIA searches years later. Think about the frozen battlefield. Bodies preserved in snow. Modern forensics. Remains identification. Recovering war dead. Think about the equipment recovery. Cannons retrieved. Modern sensitive items, security. Crypto. Weapons, accountability. Think about the political firestorm. Public outrage demanding answers. Modern, every military disaster creates political crisis. Think about the first congressional inquiry, precedent setting, modern congressional oversight of military, war powers resolution. Think about the cleared but resigned, exonerated but destroyed reputation, modern political versus legal accountability, Benghazi, Afghanistan. Think about the systemic failure conclusion. Not one person, whole system, modern every complex failure. Challenger, Colombia. Think about the professional army creation. Legion of the United States. Modern volunteer force versus draft. All volunteer military since 1973. Think about the Wayne preparation. 2 years training before next campaign. Modern proper preparation matters. Rushing to war fails. Think about the fallen Timbers victory. Revenge for Wabash. Modern how defeats motivate. Remember the Alamo. Pearl Harbor. Think about the Greenville Treaty. Military victory led to political settlement. Modern wars end in negotiations. Every peace treaty. Think about the Northwest Territory opening. Military cleared way for settlement. Modern military enabling policy. Regime change. Stabilization operations. Think about the expansion catalyst. Defeat forced growth. Modern how setbacks drive improvement. Military innovation from failure. Think about the casualty asymmetry. 97% versus less than 10%. Modern asymmetric warfare results. Technology, tactics gaps. Think about the complete surprise. Americans didn't expect encirclement. Modern expecting one battle, getting another. Every tactical surprise. Think about the sound of battle. Forest echoes, screaming. Modern acoustic signatures. Gunfire, explosions, trauma sounds. Think about the smell of gunpowder. Sulfur, smoke choking. Modern cordite, propellant. Chemical signatures of combat. Think about the visual obscuration. Couldn't see enemies. Modern fog of war literal. Smoke, dust, darkness. Think about the desperation decision. Abandon wounded to save some. Modern impossible choices. Trolley problem in combat. Think about the survivor guilt. Those who ran lived. Modern PTSD, moral injury, leaving comrades behind. Think about the officer responsibility. Saint, Clair's burden. Modern command accountability. Every leader's weight. Think about the political general. Saint, Clair was governor, not just military. Modern political appointees and military. Competence versus connections. Think about the militia unreliability. Broke immediately. Modern every army's weak links. Training standards matter. Think about the regular steadiness. Fought 3 hours despite odds. Modern professional troops hold longer. Discipline under fire. Think about the Native Confederation. Multiple tribes unified. Modern alliance warfare. Coalition building determines strength. Think about the British guns. Many natives had British weapons. Modern foreign support to insurgents. Proxy warfare. Think about the intelligence prep. Natives watched for weeks. Modern reconnaissance. A surveillance. Preparation phase matters. Think about the night positioning. Moved into place in darkness. Modern night movement tactics. Darkness as cover. Think about the encirclement completion. 30 minutes to surround. Modern maneuver speed. How fast can you position? Think about the command decision timeline. 3 hours from attack to breakout order. Modern decision-making under pressure. ODA loop. Think about the no-win scenario. Every option bad. Modern Kobayashi Maru. Sometimes you just lose. Think about the artillery ineffectiveness. Cannons couldn't hit forest targets. Modern weapon systems have limitations. Wrong tool for mission. Think about the logistics math. 1,000 men need tons of food daily. Modern calculating supply requirements. Beans and bullets. Think about the desertion rate. Lost half strength before battle. Modern unit cohesion indicators. Desertion predicts collapse. Think about the march rate. 5 to 6 miles per day. Modern movement speeds with impediments. Logistics tail slows. Think about the road dependence. Building route as they went. Modern MSR security. Main supply route protection. Think about the water access. Couldn't reach safely. Modern water as tactical resource. Every desert operation. Think about the ammunition expenditure. 3 hours emptied pouches. Modern fire discipline. Rate of fire versus available rounds. Think about the bayonet effectiveness. Only option when out of ammo. Modern close combat last resort. Every infantryman trains bayonet. Think about the run speed. 30 miles in hours. Modern forced march rates. Baton death march comparisons. Think about the relief force size. 100 soldiers to rescue thousands. Modern QRF sizing. Quick reaction force calculation. Think about the burial impossibility. Too many bodies. Modern mass casualty incidents. Overwhelming death. Think about the investigation politics. Blame versus learning. Modern every inquiry balances both. After action reviews. Think about the cleared verdict. Evidence showed systemic failure. Modern complex. COES. Rarely one person responsible. Think about the reputation destruction. Legal exoneration. Social condemnation. Modern court of public opinion. Cancel culture. Think about the military reform. Defeat drove professionalization. Modern, every disaster changes doctrine. 9/11 created DHS. Think about the Legion model. Professional, trained, equipped. Modern standing army concept. Volunteer force standards. Think about the Anthony Wayne selection. Aggressive leader chosen. Modern matching commander to mission. Personalities matter. Think about the 2-year prep. Deliberate training cycle. Modern force generation timelines. Building units before deploying. Think about the fallen timbers tactics. Wayne studied enemy, adapted. Modern learning, enemy TTPs. Tactics, techniques, procedures. Think about the revenge motivation. Wabash drove determination. Modern vendetta in warfare. Personal, national revenge. Think about the treaty terms. Military victory enabled negotiation. Modern negotiating from strength. Leverage in diplomacy. Think about the land opening. Military cleared. Settlers followed. Modern military enabling civil policy. Stabilization operations. Think about the expansion narrative. Manifest destiny origins. Modern every empire's expansion logic. Justifying conquest. Think about the native perspective. Defending homeland. Modern every occupied people resists. Legitimacy of resistance. Think about the cultural clash. Two worldviews incompatible. Modern cultural conflicts. Clash of civilizations debates. Think about the treaty exclusion. Natives not party to Paris Treaty. Modern decisions about people without them. Every colonial legacy. Think about the debt crisis driving policy. Economics forced military action. Modern every war has economic dimensions. Resource conflicts. Think about the taxation inability. Articles couldn't collect revenue. Modern failed states. Government capacity matters. Think about the Confederation weakness. Structural governmental failure. Modern when constitutions don't work. Political reform necessity. Think about the land speculation. Selling territory not yet controlled. Modern futures markets. Selling what you don't have. Think about the squatter problem. Illegal settlement. Modern every settlement dispute. Israeli-Palestinian parallels. Think about the forced removal. Clearing land for sale. Modern every ethnic cleansing. Population transfer horrors. Think about the multiple failures. Harmar, then Steint. Clair, then success. Modern persistence after defeats. Trying until success. Think about the learning curve. Wayne learned from Saint. Clair's mistakes. Modern institutional learning. Capturing lessons. Think about the different battlefields. Wabash versus fallen timbers. Modern, every war has multiple battles. Campaigns, not single fights. Think about the generational conflict. Decades of warfare. Modern every long war. Afghanistan 20 years. Think about the Washington leadership. President personally directing. Modern civilian control of military. Constitutional principle. Think about the frontier psychology. Settlers versus establishment. Modern, every frontier mentality. American West. Israeli settlements. Think about the militia tradition. Citizen soldiers. Modern National Guard. Reserve components. Think about the professional versus amateur. Regular army versus militia. Modern active duty versus reserves. Different capabilities. Think about the Revolutionary War legacy. Veterans leading expansion. Modern every war's veterans. How experience shapes next generation. Think about the British role. Supplying natives. Modern proxy warfare. Supporting insurgents. Think about the international dimensions. European powers watching. Modern every war has audience. International opinion. Think about the credibility crisis. Defeats undermined U.S. Modern reputation matters. Prestige in international relations. Think about the national identity. Young nation defining itself. Modern how nations form identity. Nationalism construction. Think about the continental ambition. Coast-to-coast vision. Modern every expanding power. Lebensraum. Sphere of influence. Think about the indigenous genocide. Systematic destruction of cultures. Modern every colonial legacy. Facing historical crimes. Think about the historical memory. Wabash mostly forgotten. Modern selective memory. Which battles we remember. Think about the Little Bighorn comparison. More famous, less catastrophic. Modern narrative versus numbers. What stories stick? Think about the proportional losses. 97%, worst by percentage. Modern comparing disasters. Metrics of defeat. Think about the officer corps destruction. Leadership decimated. Modern rebuilding after catastrophe. Institutional recovery. Think about the ransom possibilities. Captives sometimes returned. Modern prisoner negotiations. Hostage situations. Think about the torture stories. Captive treatment. Modern POW treatment. Geneva Convention's origin. Think about the scalping practice. Cultural warfare. Modern every culture's combat practices. Beheadings. Crucifixions. So what's the final lesson of the Battle of the Wabash? It's this: underestimating your enemy is fatal. The Americans assumed native warriors were inferior fighters, savages who would scatter when faced with organized soldiers. Instead, they encountered brilliant tacticians who executed a sophisticated encirclement, used terrain expertly, and inflicted the worst defeat in U.S. Army history. Wabash teaches us that preparation matters more than courage. St. Clair's soldiers were brave. They fought for 3 hours against impossible odds. But bravery without adequate equipment, training, and supplies just produces brave corpses. Wabash teaches us that logistics wins wars. The Americans lost before the battle started because their supply chain failed. Their weapons were faulty, and their soldiers were exhausted. All the tactical skill in the world can't overcome logistical failure. Wabash teaches us about intelligence failures. St. Clair had warnings, scouts reported natives gathering. He ignored them and marched anyway. What you don't know will kill you, but so will knowing and not believing. Wabash teaches us about terrain as weapon. The forest gave the natives cover while exposing the Americans. Every successful ambush in history uses terrain to multiply force. Wabash teaches us about encirclement tactics. Once surrounded, the American army was doomed. Kani, Stalingrad, every encirclement demonstrates the same principle. Being surrounded is catastrophic. Wabash teaches us that bureaucracy kills. Saint, Clair begged for supplies, weapons, trained soldiers. Red tape denied him. How many soldiers died because requisitions weren't processed? Wabash teaches us about professional versus citizen armies. The militia broke immediately. The regulars fought longer. Professionalism matters under fire. Wabash teaches us about impossible choices. Saint, Clair had to abandon the wounded to save anyone. These decisions haunt leaders forever. Moral injury is real. Wabash teaches us that defeat drives reform. The disaster forced creation of the Legion of the United States, America's first professional standing army. Sometimes you have to fail catastrophically to change. Wabash teaches us about casualty care. The wounded were abandoned, left to die. Modern battlefield medicine, medevac, trauma care. The golden hour came from learning this horror. Wabash teaches us about political pressure. Washington demanded victory. Saint, Clair complied despite warnings. Political timelines don't match military readiness. Wabash teaches us about desertion as indicator. Hundreds deserted before battle, a clear sign the army was breaking. Desertion rates predict collapse. Wabash teaches us about native military brilliance. Little Turtle and Blue Jacket executed a masterpiece of tactics. Indigenous peoples aren't primitive, they're different. Wabash teaches us about treaty violations. The British gave away land they didn't control. The natives weren't consulted. Every unjust treaty plants future war. Wabash teaches us about economic motivations. The U.S. needed land sales to pay debts. Economics drives conflict as much as ideology. Wabash teaches us about congressional oversight. The first investigation set precedent for civilian control and accountability. Democracy requires transparency. Wabash teaches us about historical memory. This was proportionally America's worst military defeat. Yet, it's barely remembered. We remember myths, not facts. Wabash teaches us about the cost of expansion. Every empire pays in blood. Manifest destiny, built on mass graves. Wabash teaches us that winning matters more than fighting well. The Americans fought bravely, but lost totally. Courage without victory is just tragedy. The defenders of Wabash Little Turtle's Confederacy saved their land temporarily. But the lesson cuts both ways. The Americans learned, reformed, returned stronger. Wayne's Legion won fallen timbers. The Treaty of Greenville opened the Northwest. The natives won the battle but lost the war. That's the tragedy, tactical brilliance. Strategic defeat. The critics ask, was American expansion inevitable? Could coexistence have worked? These questions have no easy answers. What happened, happened. We can acknowledge native tactical brilliance while mourning the cultural destruction that followed. We can honor American soldiers who died while condemning the policy that sent them. History is complex. The question isn't whether Wabash's losers were brave, they were. The question is, what can we learn? How do we prepare for war properly? How do we avoid underestimating enemies? How do we balance political pressure with military readiness? How do we make impossible decisions in combat? These questions matter, because wars continue. Intelligence failures, logistical breakdowns, underestimated enemies, difficult terrain, political pressure, bureaucratic delays, all still kill soldiers today. Wabash warns us, respect your enemy. Prepare thoroughly. Logistics matters. Terrain decides. Intelligence saves lives. Professional training beats enthusiasm. Casualties require care. Reform requires catastrophe. If this exploration of America's worst defeat taught you something, subscribe to Maproom Battles. Comment, should we remember defeats as much as victories? Thanks for studying hard history with me. Remember, the worst defeat teaches the most. Learn from Wabash.